Is there any better way to get an accurate representation of the NBA playoffs coming up than to do a simulation in 2K? Yeah, probably, because 2K's simulations are always on the interesting side, to say nice things about the game. But we're going to see what happens regardless. In the Eastern Conference, we have Isaiah Thomas and the Boston Celtics, number 1 seed, going up against Jimmy Butler, Dwayne Wade, Rajon Rondo, and the number 8 seed, Chicago. Maybe they could pull off the upset, who knows. Then if we go on to the Cleveland Cavaliers and LeBron James, a weird season for them. I think they're the best team in the East, as many would agree on that one, I assume. But they are still number 2, going up against Indiana, Paul George. Paul George and LeBron have had some battles in the past, including one a couple weeks ago. The Toronto Raptors, who survived pretty well even through Kyle Lowry's injury, will be going up against Giannis and the always energetic and unpredictable Milwaukee Bucks. And in the middle series, we have John Wall, the Washington Wizards, who just went on a surge this season after disappointing out of the gate. And they will be going up against the 5th seed for life, aka Paul Millsap, Dwight Howard, Schroeder, and the Atlanta Hawks. And then if we go on to the Western Conference, Curry, Clay, the Splash Brothers, I hate that nickname, but I said it anyway. The Golden State Warriors up against the Portland Trail Blazers, who, similar to the Wizards, really turned it on as the season went along and got themselves into the postseason, so good for them. The Utah Jazz and the Los Angeles Clippers, in my opinion, could be the toughest series to predict. But knowing 2K, this could end up being a sweep for either team because, I mean, if you've ever run a simulation in this game, then you won't be surprised by anything. And then the MVP matchup. James Harden for the Houston Rockets, Russell Westbrook for the Oklahoma City Thunder. That should be an exciting one. And then for the last series, we have the San Antonio Spurs and the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, the Kawhi MVP train has been heating up. Who knows what's going to happen with that one? And the Grizzlies, with their physicality and toughness, they know how to extend a playoff series. Can they actually win it? I don't know. Let's run the simulation and holy upset. So the Celtics are out. And then if you look at the bottom left, the Grizzlies swept the Spurs. Well, this is definitely 2K doing its thing, so let's dive into this. For the Celtics-Bulls series, Isaiah Thomas, scoring was a little down based on the regular season, but still pretty good. Al Horford did his thing while being inefficient. Avery Bradley was pretty good, but the Bulls still won this thing in 7, so what happened? Jimmy Butler, a very good series for him, and Dwayne Wade, so it seemed that the Celtics, from an offensive standpoint, they weren't too far off from what they want to do. Isaiah was still able to lead the offense pretty well, even if he was at 23 points as opposed to his normal 29. Horford being his versatile self, although 40% from the field and 29% from 3 is not beautiful. Playoff Dwayne Wade is kind of a thing. Normally he becomes a fantastic 3-point shooter. He was a great scorer from everywhere in this series. Apparently the Celtics just had no real answer for the guy. And the Bulls as a whole, they managed to upset the Celtics 7 games. So Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade are going on to round 2, as they will be facing the Washington Wizards, who are also pushed to 7 by the Atlanta Hawks. What happened in this series? Well, John Wall, 16-10, pretty solid. Bradley Beal, 17-7. They both had good series, not great, which probably explains why it was pushed to 7. Atlanta did some good things with their point guard spot, but Millsap was terrible. Only 10 points for the guy. But still, it seems the Hawks, being a very well-coached team and a pretty good culture. Mike Budenholzer knows what he's doing there, which I just said, but whatever, we're going to roll with it. Millsap having a tough series, though. That's weird because maybe Markieff Morris just really locked him up. But the Wizards will be going on to round 2. John Wall and his athleticism and playmaking seemed to eventually be too much for Atlanta, as this thing still went 7. So we've already had a pair of Game 7s so far, so the theatrics are definitely there. Another one for you, as the Raptors just barely beat out the Milwaukee Bucks. And Kyle Lowry, seems his postseason struggles continued as only 13 points and 42% from the field. DeMar DeRozan was great, 57% from 3. I'm pretty sure he'd even be surprised to see that one, but good for him. Serge Ibaka with a solid performance. And Giannis and the crew just perhaps a year or two away really dominating the NBA. Seems the Bucks just didn't have an answer for DDR and all the mid-range jumpers and apparently three-point jumpers he was making. So it's good to know that at least one of Toronto's big two was able to show up for this series. They acquired Serge Ibaka for defense and shooting, and it seems like they were correct in their investment. And the Bucks, I mean, they still push them to the brink, so that's a good sign, but they go down. And a little more generous of a series here from 2K as the Cavaliers beat the Pacers in 6. Paul George, only 19.5 points a game. A bit of a contrast from last season against the Raptors. LeBron with almost a triple-double at 22 points. And if we look at the rest of the big three for the Cavs, Kevin Love, it took a lot of shots, but he got to 17 points. Kyrie was way more efficient. I could picture this series going 6 games, maybe even 5 if the Cavaliers just decide to step on the Pacers' throats early in the series. This one could be intriguing in real life just because of the Paul George dynamic, because he's able to go to a different level in the playoffs, but as far as 2K is concerned, the Cavaliers didn't have too much resistance in this series, as Paul George was probably defending LeBron for the majority of it and just wasn't able to get the better of him. Now, if we head over to the Western Conference, we'll get to that huge upset, but first, let's start with the top. The Warriors and the Trail Blazers, we're not going to look at the stats for this series. I mean, it was a sweep, so I think we all have a decent idea of what happened. The Warriors throwing the ball around, getting off-ball screens, transition three-pointers, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson being impossible to defend. I'm going to assume that's what happened, given that this was a sweep. The Clippers and the Jazz ends in 6, and if we look at the stats for these two, the Hayward factor was, pretty good, but he wasn't able to match just the star power of the Clippers. Blake Griffin was very good. They could not defend J.J. Redick at all. And then Chris Paul, his playmaking and his efficiency was there as well. So I would say the Jazz are a deeper team, and they also use their rotations way better than the Clippers do. But if you have the maybe 2 best players in the series on the same team, depending on how Rudy Gobert would perform in this thing, it's kind of tough for the other team to really have a chance against you, and that seemed to be the narrative of this one. Chris Paul and how he can beat his defenders and hit mid-range jumpers, play in the pick and roll, be a fantastic playmaker. J.J. Redick, Blake Griffin, Utah just wasn't able to answer. The MVP matchup managed to go 7 games. We got quite a few Game 7s in this first round, which is always fun, especially when you're not a fan of either team. If you are a fan of either team, then it's nerve-wracking and then some. Westbrook was great. Harden was not as good, actually, around 18 points a game, but his Rockets still managed to win this one. I'm sure this would spark some sort of debate in the comments section, because the moment that you mention Russell Westbrook or James Harden, or God forbid you mention them both, it just lights a fire under NBA fans on Twitter, in the comments, and whatever the hell else I'm talking about. It's a good series, and I'll admit, just as I dove into some of the numbers for the Thunder, I think that rhymed. I got a little more excited for this series, so that's cool. And now, what the hell happened over here? Why were the San Antonio Spurs swept by the Memphis Grizzlies? Well, Mike Conley had an out-of-body experience, becoming perhaps the best point guard in the NBA for a 4-game stretch. Marc Gasol, 18 points and 6 assists, although he really wasn't killing them. Kawhi was doing his thing. What was the problem for San Antonio? I'll tell you what it was LaMarcus Aldridge. 8 points on 33% shooting, my god, he was terrible. Kawhi is asked to carry a larger role for the Spurs, given his ability to create his own shot now, and he was able to do that. LA sucked, man. Seems that the Grizzlies' tough, physical, gritty style of play was too much for him, as he was just, flat out bad. And then on the other side of things, Memphis, I mean, they have a history of doing this sort of thing. Like, they've beaten the Clippers in round 1. They pushed the Warriors to a game 6 just by being tougher than them. So, I would have given them a couple of wins in this series, but to actually win in a sweep, hey man, maybe 2K is going to be right. And if they are, then this will be the craziest first round ever.